There's a little known seller protection on eBay that a lot of sellers don't even realize exists, which is if you're a top-rated seller or you offer free returns, you can deduct up to 50% from a refund when a buyer sends back an item in worse condition, like they return something open that you sold new in box, it's pretty nice. And fortunately, that part hasn't changed. You can still do that, but what has changed is the protection that used to come with it. And once you see what eBay quietly changed last week and why, you might think twice before giving a partial refund in the future. So let's talk about that. Hello and welcome back to my weekly show where I talk about the ups and downs and in-betweens of selling on eBay. I've got a show for you this week. It's not necessarily packed. I had a bit of a weird week last week, not a whole lot of sales. I'll tell you about that here in a second, but it's not typical, so it's going to be kind of funny to walk through. So let's go ahead and jump back into this seller protection change right away. And let me just start with an example. I think that'll be easier. I once sold a Le Creuset pot, a pretty nice one. The buyer got it, they used it, and they scorched the bottom of it, and then opened up a return saying the scorch marks were shipping damage. Once I got it back, I saw it was the same pot. I recognized the cosmetic flaws that I had disclosed in the listing, but unless the box caught fire during shipment, they clearly just had a cooking mishap and wanted me to pay for it. So they sent it back and demanded a refund. And I followed eBay's policy here, and because the item was in worse condition than what I sent it in, I only issued a 50% refund, and then I cleaned it up and resold it for much less money. Now, the buyer got mad, obviously, and they left a negative feedback, and they reached out to eBay, and eBay did refund them the rest of the money, which sucks. I wish they wouldn't do that, but it didn't come out of my balance. And then eBay removed the negative feedback automatically. That was the protection in action. But as of September 3rd, that protection is gone. Here's what eBay says directly. The Federal Trade Commission's recent final rule banning fake reviews and testimonials requires businesses to avoid any practice that could appear to suppress negative feedback. To remain compliant, will no longer remove negative or neutral feedback in the following return situations. Number 1, the seller offered free returns, handled the return, and issued a refund. Number 2, the item was returned, used, or damaged, and the seller deducted an amount from the refund. Now, I've actually never had to ask for negative feedback to be removed under that first policy, but the second is something I've definitely taken advantage of many times in the past, not just for that Le Creuset pot, and you probably have as well. And just to reiterate, you can still issue a partial refund. That's not going away. But if the buyer leaves negative feedback as a result, and there's always a pretty good chance that they will when you don't give them all of their money back, eBay's no longer going to remove that feedback. So going forward, you're left with two choices in this scenario. Number 1, you eat the full return, take the financial hit, and hope the buyer doesn't leave negative feedback anyway. Or number 2, you stand your ground and you give a partial refund and you keep the negative feedback if it comes, which is obviously much more likely to come. It's really a lose-lose situation for us sellers, and that's definitely frustrating. Now, you might be asking, why this protection, right? Like, eBay still removes negative feedback for other reasons like extortion or threats or abusive language and lots of other reasons. So why did this scenario get pulled? And here's the difference, I think. In those other cases where eBay will still remove negative feedback, the buyer they're clearly breaking eBay's feedback policy rules. But in the partial refund scenario, there's technically no feedback policy rule that the buyer is breaking there. You know, they went through the return process, they sent the item back, they left negative feedback based on how they felt about the outcome of you only refunding half their money. Now, there is a policy that says if a buyer returns an item, it should be returned in the same condition in which it was received. And if a buyer breaks that rule, the policy goes on to say that the seller might deduct from the refund to cover the loss in the item's value. But nowhere in the feedback policy does it say that the buyer cannot leave negative feedback if the seller only returns some of the money when the item was returned in worse condition. Now, would us sellers say any of this is fair? Like, definitely not, right? Like in most cases, we assume that the buyers are gaming the system when this happens, maybe even scamming you directly. And even when they're not trying to scam you, like expecting you as the seller to cover the cost of a buyer opening up a once sealed item that can now only be sold at a fraction of the value it is unfair. It's totally unfair. But technically it's not against any policy for the buyer to leave negative feedback if you don't refund all of their money. And unless you can prove intent, eBay is not going to consider it a scam, which would make it obviously against eBay's policy. But that's basically impossible. So they treat the feedback as legitimate buyer experience, even when we think it's clearly dishonest or unreasonable. And that's, I think, why eBay just refunds the buyer the rest of the money out of their own pocket and just moves on. Like, it's like they're trying to keep both sellers and buyers happy without having to prove who's lying. And under the FTC's new rule, removing that kind of feedback is now considered review suppression, which is exactly what the law is trying to prevent. So eBay made a calculated move here, right? They're still going to remove feedback when the buyer breaks clearly defined feedback rules. But if the buyer stays just inside the lines, even if they're working the system, the feedback is going to stay, because removing it now carries too much legal risk for eBay under this new FTC ruling. Now, it does seem like eBay could have just modified its feedback policy to include this stipulation so that removing negative feedback related to partial refunds is the same as, say, harassment, but they didn't for some reason. So here we are. And we can cry and complain all day about this decision, but that's only hurting ourselves. eBay can and will make decisions that we may not understand or agree with, but we still need to move forward. So how do we do that? How do we move forward? Honestly, I don't know. And with most things on eBay, it sort of depends. As I've said many times in the past, negative feedback just doesn't matter as much as it used to. I really don't sweat it. I never sit at 100%. If you sell long enough on eBay, you're bound to get a few negative feedbacks here and there. And it's because, like, some buyers just suck. Like, you can't make everyone happy. And keep in mind, eBay now leaves automatic positive feedback for you when buyers don't complain. So the occasional negative now has less impact than it used to, because your positive feedback now stacks up much faster than it ever has. And that reduces the impact to your feedback score that an occasional negative might cause. Still, I don't like it when buyers push sellers around, and I've always advocated that sellers stand up for themselves even when it could result in negative feedback. But if I'm being honest, this change makes that harder to do. Now, before you leave a comment about how you're going to record yourself packing everything you sell to act as, quote, proof that you sent the buyer what was described, don't bother with doing that. eBay doesn't accept photo or video evidence as proof of anything, and for good reason. Don't forget, there are scammers on the seller side too, and lots of them, and buyers need as much protection as us sellers do, or the whole marketplace sort of loses trust, and we are going to sell a lot less as a result. So video and photo evidence is just too easy to fabricate. You know, like, I could have two identical Le Creuset pots, one scorched and one not, and record myself packing up the clean one, and then stop recording and print another label and pack up the scorched pot off camera and send that instead. There's so many ways a seller could game that system if eBay considered photo or video proof as evidence of anything. So just don't waste your time doing that stuff, because eBay doesn't care. And also, you may think this is a reason to maybe no longer offer free returns at all, which is definitely worth considering. After all, the benefits of offering free returns just took a pretty big hit. But remember that listings with favorable to the buyer policies are generally going to rank higher in search. So expect a hit to visibility if you do offer returns now, but stop in the future. You would also lose top-rated plus status on those listings that no longer offer free returns, which means you'd lose the 10% final value fee discount that comes along with it. So make sure you're considering that as well. Personally, I probably won't change much about how I handle this. Like, if it's a high-dollar item, I'm definitely going to still use the partial refund and just take the negative feedback if it comes, because this just happens infrequently enough that I'm just not going to let a buyer walk all over me when it does happen. But if it's a low value item, I might start considering just refunding them in full after I get the item back and then just moving on. Not because I'm afraid of getting the negative, but like, so much of this business is you just got to pick your battles, right? And some fights just aren't worth it. It also depends on how resellable the item is. Like, if I can resell it without much loss in revenue, I'll be less likely to send a partial refund. If it's totally destroyed and not sellable at all, then I'll probably refund the lowest amount possible, especially the more valuable the item is. But remember, even giving the full refund doesn't mean you won't get a negative anyway, because again, some buyers just suck. And remember that first bullet point from before, where eBay said they will no longer remove negative feedback if the seller offered free returns, handled the return, and issued a refund. So even if you do offer a full refund, you could still get a negative that won't be removed under this new policy. Either way, it's not a great situation for us sellers, and it makes it way more difficult to navigate going forward. The good news is I've hardly ever needed to issue a partial refund using this policy directly. I would say like maybe 5 times in the last 5,000 sales. So it's pretty rare. But here's the thing. I've probably avoided a lot more of these situations because I could confidently stand my ground with buyers who tried to push back when I told them this policy exists when they opened up the return. With that protection gone, I'm still going to enforce my policies, but I'll likely handle these conversations with a little bit more caution. But what about you? Will this change how you deal with returns and partial refunds, or are you going to keep doing things the same way? I'm curious to hear, so let me know in the comments down below. Anyway, let's move on. As I said, I had a pretty weird week last week. I was on vacation mode almost the entire week and weekend, and so it's going to make this weekly review look pretty funny, but let's go ahead and dig into it. Let's see how we did last week. Taking a look at the last 7 days, I had a gross sale amount of $275. So not much. And a net sales of $167. We can see here for the first half or more of the week. And this doesn't include the weekend prior. I was also on vacation mode. But yeah, for the first half of the week, I had vacation mode turned on. When I'm actually on vacation and using vacation mode, by the way, I was celebrating my 16th wedding anniversary. So my wife and I went on a very little trip to celebrate that. But when I'm on vacation, I just like to turn vacation mode on and not allow sales. Some of y'all like to allow sales while you're on vacation. You can totally do that. I found that when I go on vacation, I just want to completely unplug. I don't want to have to deal with anything. And sometimes when you have vacation mode turned on, you'll get buyers reaching out asking why their item has not shipped. Yes, you can do a vacation response and all that stuff, but again, I just don't want to worry about it. And so I choose to not allow sales while on vacation, even though I know I would have made some sales when I was gone, but I just don't care. That stuff's going to sell anyway. I would rather enjoy my vacation in full without being bothered by buyers. Anyway, sales picked up again on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday once I came back home and had vacation mode turned off and was allowing sales again. Looks like my average gross per sale over the past 7 days was $39.30. My average net per sale was $23.81. My average and my net profit margin was 61%. Most of the stuff I was selling came out of garage sales. Look at that. No listing data here at all. That's because I had no listings. I listed nothing. I don't list anything while I'm on vacation, and even getting back in town, I didn't prioritize it. So it's like literally a 0 listing for the whole week, and only 7 sales as a result of not listing and having vacation mode turned on for over half of the week. So I didn't spend any money on new inventory. My cost of goods that sold was $27. Marketplace fees right around $40. Same goes for shipping labels, right around $40. 7 sales, no new listings. But I'm getting back into it now. I'm back home. I'm feeling a little bit better. So my listing volume is gonna go way up this week, and it needs it. The store needs it. Let's go ahead and jump into the top 10 sales. It's not even top 10. I only sold 7 items. So we're just gonna talk through all 7 things, which I think is actually gonna be pretty interesting, because usually I sell like 30 or 40 things and I pick the top 10 coolest or most valuable things, but you're just going to see literally everything. And there's some like not great stuff in here. So I think it's going to be eye-opening for you to see kind of the stuff that I sold this week. And I'll give you the backstory on all of it. But let's jump in first with this one. This is a Pokemon Master Trainer board game piece. And so this is interesting. I sold it for $7.99, free shipping. My net return on it was $1.79. You might be asking, like, why would you even list this? And this is a board game that I bought, a really valuable board game, usually worth between $100 and $150, or at least it was back when I bought this Pokemon Master Trainer board game. But it was incomplete. And so, and I knew that going into it. It was at a thrift store. The chances of like there being 250 pieces or whatever all intact was pretty low. But I was like, you know what? If it's complete, awesome. If it's not, I will part it out. That's what I ended up doing. I parted it out. This is a long time ago. I bought this on December 19th, 2023. So what is that? 2.5 years ago. And I've sold a lot of it. I mean, let's just take a look. I mean, my net return was $1.79. Like, was this worth it on its own? Definitely not. I'm not going to pick up this one piece and pay any money for it to resell, because it's just not worth the time and effort. But when I'm parting it out, like having one more piece in there to take a quick picture of, it's just not a big deal. And so I actually just want to see how this whole board game purchase is doing. Like I've sold a lot, obviously, over the last 2.5 years. Yeah, it looks like I've sold 17 pieces off of this board game so far. And you'll see just a wide range of net returns on this: $12, $6, $9, $3, $16, $14, $14. So I don't know what the total is exactly, but I've sold quite a bit off of this board game, probably around $75 to $100 just looking at this right here. And let's see, I don't know if there's any active. Yeah, there's one piece active. So I've got one thing left to sell from this. But yeah, so that's the story on this one, a piece that I parted out from a board game. Didn't make a whole lot of money on its own. Coming in at number 6 is this Homco Black Bear miniature figurine dealio thing here. I'm not exactly sure what it is. This is another great example of like, look, I only made $2.97 on this. Actually, I think there was 2 of these here. So yeah, there's 2 of them. So I sold the other one back in March of 2024. So what is that? A little over a year and a half ago, maybe, for a net return of $3.76, a total net return on 2 of them for $6.73. So again, like, would I buy this thing on its own? Definitely not. You know, if I saw this out somewhere, I would just not ever pick it up. But this came from a bulk buy. And so I just had literally thousands of pieces from this bulk buy. And my choice here for this is I know it's low value. It's going to be worth about $10. I can either list it and make, $7 on it, or I can just donate it. And sometimes I do donate it. This one was probably right on the threshold of like, should I donate it or should I list it? And I don't remember what it went into my thought process at the time, but I chose to list it. And the amount of time that I invested into this item on its own is just really hard to quantify, but it's not a lot. I mean, again, this is a part of a bulk buy. I'm spending under 4 minutes or so getting this thing listed. There was 2 of them, so I didn't have to make 2 listings. It was a single listing with a quantity of 2. You know, when you ship it, it takes another 4 or 5. I've got maybe 10 minutes invested into this. With, a net return total of $6.73. Like this is probably not worth it on its own. But again, when it's a part of a bulk buy, from my perspective, it's a why not? Why not just quickly list it? It'll sell eventually, and it did. And so, but that's your choice to make. You may not feel the same way, and you can choose to donate this type of thing. But I would not recommend picking something like this up on its own, just because the demand is low. The competition is extremely high for this thing. Like you look up Homco, I'm not going to look it up. You can look it up. There's probably like tens of thousands of listings that are similar but different figurines. There's probably hundreds of listings of this figurine in particular. You know it's going to take a long time to sell. Don't buy this stuff on its own. It's just it's a waste of time in that regard. But if you have it already, then you're like, well, should I donate it? Should I list it? In this case, I chose to list it. It took a while to sell, but I made some money. Coming in at number 5, Chaco sandals. Chaco's a good brand to look out for. They hold their value pretty well. These are actually youth, so these are kid-sized, and they sold for $28.99. My net return on it was $6.68. Why? That doesn't seem right. And that seems really low. Why is that? Yeah, I have a net profit margin of 23%. What's going on here? Oh, my purchase price. So yeah, these were expensive. These we should not have bought them at this price. Sometimes we'll see these at garage sales for $2 or $3. Then it makes sense. At $11.50 in retrospect, I probably would not have paid that price for them because it took over a year to sell and I only made $6.68. It's just not the type of inventory that is going to make you a very lucrative reseller. I don't remember why we decided to buy this, but that's the thing. Like, you're just going to make these types of decisions when you're doing this job. You're just going to buy stuff that ends up being not worth it. And that's why you need to be tracking your data, because without it, you probably sell something for $30 and think like, oh, wow, I made some money on it. In your head, you're like, I don't know, I made $20 after fees or something. But like, would I have remembered that I paid $11.50 for this over a year ago? I just wouldn't. I would not remember that in any way. And so tracking your data makes it much easier to make sourcing decisions in the future. I just would not pay $11.50 for this now. I probably thought that they were worth more than $30. Maybe I didn't even know. I bet what it was is I didn't know that they were youth at the time, and I thought that they were going to be worth more money. That's my guess. I don't remember. But either way, tracking your data allows you to look back and sort of reflect on your decisions at the time of buy and assess whether you would do that again. It helps hone your skill of sourcing and going out and buying stuff. So definitely a good thing to do to track your numbers. Coming in at number 4 is this vintage tour poster from White Zombie. This is from the 90s. This is a really cool poster. This came from a venue in Oklahoma City called Alcatraz, not Alcatraz in San Francisco. This was in Oklahoma City, but it sold for $34.99 on consignment. That's $25 plus $9.99 in shipping. I split the net return 50-50 with the person I'm consigning with. That meant the net return for me was $12.10, which you can see there, and I paid out $12.10 $12.10 to the person I'm consigning with. So low net profit margin, 35%, but still $12.10 in my pocket for this particular poster sold on consignment. Coming in at number 3, this is a very weird Chicago Bears jacket. I think I got this one in a bulk buy. Yeah, I've had this for a while. So 7 months. It looks like I listed it way back in... Originally listed it in February of 2025. So that was this year. Okay. So not surprising. That was at the tail end of football season, and the Bears definitely weren't playing still at that time. If anyone else was, probably right around when the Super Bowl was. So I expected this one to take a while to sell. And we just had, NFL season kicked off yesterday. And today's Monday. Or maybe a couple days ago, Thursday or Friday of last week. Either way, football season's back. So your NFL stuff's probably going to start selling if it's not already. This one sold September 7th, yesterday on a Sunday, probably the day the Bears are playing, but it's just a weird looking jacket. This was an Army Nike Shield Salute Service, it was called. It sold for $40.66. That's $33.67 plus $6.99 to ship. Actual cost to ship was $6.17. My net return on this one was $21.98 on this Chicago Bears jacket. Just a weird looking army green jacket. Not your typical football apparel. Coming in at number 2 is this wool sweater made in Ireland. This is probably a thrift store buy. Yeah, it came from a Goodwill. Paid $5 for it. I've had it for a really long time. I tend to buy these wool sweaters that are made in Ireland. They're usually like Aran Island sweaters, or if not that, you could just tell that usually on their label, they have like a very like homemade type label. It's not like a big company that makes these things. This one actually sold international. So that's always nice. I like selling through the international shipping program because it means you get no returns. And so if an international buyer ends up returning the item or wanting to return the item through the international shipping program, eBay covers you as the seller, and you don't have to give any money back, nothing. They just handle everything, which is really nice. So you just know this sale is a done deal, which is also good for this type of wool sweater because often they can just like lose their shape. And I just sometimes get more returns on this type of like wool clothing because, maybe somebody had washed it and it has shrunk a little bit. I mean, I always include the measurements, but my point is they're just a little bit more of a dangerous item when it comes to returns, and they're more prone to returns. But I still like buying them. I think they're really cool, and they're usually pretty valuable. I paid $5 for this one, and it sold for $55. So pretty good return, $37.41 on this Aran Cozy wool sweater. That leaves us with number 1. This was the best sale of the small, tiny, low sales week. This new in box Samsung camcorders. This is kind of an old school camcorder. I can't remember what the year was on it. I think it was like 2008, maybe right around that range, but it was brand new in box. It had never been used. It was open box, but that meant I could open it up and look at it, make sure everything was in there. It was all in there. It sold for $96.98. It took almost 2 years to sell this thing. But I did make, $71.62. I'm curious, like, what was my average time to sell this week? It's got to be high because everything that I sold this week was just really old. Over a year, my average time to sell. I didn't notice that before, but yeah, that's crazy. The average time to sell between list date and sale date for everything that sold this week, the seven items that sold, was over a year. That's sort of wild. Nice to get rid of some of that old inventory. This thing took $6.93 to ship. My net return was $71.62. That's a 1,400% ROI. Good little sale. Took a long time, but I'm glad to get it out the door. Oh, God. All right. Lights out. Let's have a conversation. Last week's video, did y'all see that? My video last week on why I stopped calculating sell-through rate. As predicted, it was a controversial video of mine. There's so many just resellers on YouTube talking about sell-through rate, including myself in the past. I'm talking about, using formulas to calculate sell-through rate and I'll do everything. And I just I sat down and started to realize over time that just mattered less. I've still been as successful as a reseller, evolving my thoughts on sell-through rate and just not doing actual calculations in my head. And you can just you can look through the comments of that video last week and just see evidence of why it's such a hotly debated topic. There was people who watched that video and were like, I didn't know that that's what I've been doing. And I didn't know that that was not sell-through rate. So there's people that just like assumed that sell-through rate meant what I was calling demand check, where you're not actually doing calculations. And then obviously there's people going back and forth about like, well, here's the right calculation, here's the wrong calculation, which just proves to me why it doesn't matter. Nobody can agree on the calculation method anyway. And it's just so difficult to do on eBay. And so I just wanted to share my experience of how I just do a quick gut level check, like, hey, this is roughly how long this thing is going to take to sell. And even then it's not perfect. Like we just walked through a ton of stuff of mine that took forever to sell. I don't remember if I looked at the sell through rate or the demand check when doing that. I probably did. Maybe I didn't. I don't know. Like that, I don't know, the Samsung, the camcorder, like I sort of don't care what the demand is or the sell through rate of something like that is. It's a brand new unboxed vintage electronic. It's going to sell eventually. I just don't mind if it takes a while to sell, and it's going to sell for good money. So, I just don't care. I don't care that it takes a long time. But other people do care, and I respect that. And so I just think that it's often much easier to get what you need in order to make a buying decision without having to mess with a bunch of numbers. Anyway, it was funny and fun to see the response to that video. A lot of people, I got a lot of downvotes on it. People talking trash. It's okay. It's part of putting videos out there. Not everyone's going to agree with you. So anyway, I'm back to feeling better. Not 100%, but maybe 90%, and getting better every day. So thank you for your well wishes in the comments. And you know what? If you made it this far listening to me ramble on in the dark like this, and you're not already subscribed to the channel, go ahead and subscribe. It helps me out, helps build the channel up. I appreciate it. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next week.